The Sports Town Podcast.
Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Nicely from the Ball Fake Podcast, a returning guest. How's it going, Nicely?
Not too bad. And yourself, JJ?
I am doing great. Especially after USA held off to beat France yesterday. Now, at the time of this recording, it was Saturday. Before we start talking about the NBA draft and free agency, if you want to talk more about your podcast, I know you mentioned it before in your last time, but just to kind of refresh the people who are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, we talk about basketball on our podcast. We're an NBA podcast specifically, but we also cover some college athletics as well. And, anything revolving around basketball, typically, we might have some episodes where we might talk about a high school basketball player. I expect to do that this upcoming season. But other than that, the name kind of speaks for itself, Ball Fake Podcast, basically everything revolving around basketball.
Okay. Yeah, because I think last time you came over, I think it was during I can't remember if it was the conference finals or the NBA finals, but we had a pretty good conversation, and it was, I enjoyed it a lot. So, and now as we jump onto the NBA draft, of course, Cade Cunningham goes number 1 overall. How well do you think he'll do in his first year in Detroit? Because it seems like everybody, like in any type of sport in general, everybody goes to die when they go to Detroit. How well do you think Cade Cunningham will do with the Pistons in his first year?
I think he'll keep his head above water. This is a guy, he's got do-it-all ability. He can play inside, he can play outside, got phenomenal passing ability. He's going to be an astronomical passer at the next level. And I think, the Detroit Pistons, they have a roster that's good enough for him to operate. Maybe they make it to the postseason. Not exactly sure just yet. We still have to see who else they add in free agency and, the rest of this offseason and everything. But I feel like Cade Cunningham has a very bright future in Detroit.
Yeah, and it seemed like at first I was just shocked that Detroit got the number 1 overall pick because almost in every draft lottery they always get screwed, them and the Knicks, it seems like. Right. But I think Cade Cunningham's going to be really good. Do you think he'll win Rookie of the Year this year?
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be the front runner. I like guys like Jaylin Green, Jalen Suggs, even Scottie Barnes out of Toronto. But I think Cade Cunningham will definitely run away with it. He's probably got the best fit as far as in correlation with his game compared to all the other lottery picks and prospects in it throughout this entire NBA draft. But yeah, I think Cade Cunningham definitely runs away with it.
Who do you think Cade Cunningham in the NBA today, who do you think he resembles the most?
There's actually a number of comparisons you can throw out there. We've all heard a lot about Luka Doncic and everything, but I think he takes a little bit of bits and pieces from a ton of guys. I think he's got a little bit of Chris Middleton to his game. Not very athletic, but he does his due diligence when it comes to scoring the basketball. And then obviously we talked about Luka Doncic, that comparison. I think those guys have similarities when it comes to their passing ability, and then I think he doesn't necessarily play like Jason Tatum to a certain degree, but I think there are hints in, areas in his game that could be similar. And then I feel like he also has a similar body type. Whenever he fills up his body when it comes to, strength and conditioning and everything, I think we're going to see the similarities there. But Cade Cunningham, he's going to be a phenomenal prospect in his first year in the NBA.
Yeah, I think if he can resemble any of those, at least early in his career, if he can just resemble some of those, or at least half of what those players are, because if he does that, the Pistons will be somewhat good. And of course, they have to give him some talent. He doesn't have a lot of options right now, but I feel like maybe in a few years, the Pistons, if they surround the right talent around Cade Cunningham, they can be good and maybe be contenders in the East.
Could you see them making a postseason this year by any chance?
I don't think so. I know the East isn't as good as the West, but I just can't really see the Pistons. I think they're still a year or two away from actually making it. But I think it's going to be a few years before they actually get into the playoffs. And, of course, it'll be a few years after that until they can contenders. It just depends on what they can do in free agency, I think. So if you can actually lure people to Detroit, which is going to be hard. So
Right.
And speaking of Jaylin Green, we just mentioned him. A lot of people think he could be the Rookie of the Year, and a lot of people were very hyped. Of course, he didn't go to college. He went straight to the G League, which is probably going to end up happening a lot more now. But what do you think about his potential? And I know the Rockets are similar to the Pistons. They don't have a lot of options right now. But how well do you think Jaylin Green will do in his first year in the NBA?
I think he should definitely excel, especially if, they defer to him in a lot of moments. When it comes to looking at their roster, it is a little bit weird to a certain degree. I mean, you still have John Wall there. I think that's the reason why, they ended up selecting Jaylin Green, just because he'd probably be a better fit alongside John Wall, even though he's probably not going to be a long-term person that stays in that organization. But I think Jaylin Green definitely has the talent to, keep his head above water his first year, might make a lot of noise. Maybe we could see a potential positive rebuild in Houston, because we already know Houston has had a lot of problems these last couple of seasons when it comes to, just decision making and their overall play. So, but I think Jaylin Green can be the one bright spot in their season next year.
Yeah, and I think, and I mentioned this on my last episode of the podcast, or I had some guests came on, but do you think John Wall will be traded from Houston? Because it seems like he's going to. I originally, before Russell Westbrook was traded to the Lakers, I thought I could see John Wall going to the Lakers. But what do you think about John Wall's future?
It's very risky. I'm not sure any team is really all that high on a guy like John Wall. I mean, I'm not sure how many years he has left on his contract. That is going to play a really big part in him, getting traded to another organization. But I honestly couldn't see any team trying to, take on that contract. Once again, I don't remember how many years is left on his contract and how much money is left, but there's not going to be too many people that are in need of a guy like John Wall.
Yeah, injuries are definitely a concern, but if you look at his stats, they're pretty good. I mean, he's a top 10 point guard. I mean, he's not top 5 because there's just so many good point guards in the league. But if you really look at John Wall's stats, they're impressive. But yeah, the injury concern, I'm not exactly sure how much he has left in his contract either. I just think he's going to I think he's going to end up getting traded before the season starts, but I'm not really sure what team would look for him, because I think a lot of people already have their point guard position already, filled, but we'll see. Back with Jaylin Green, who do you think he reminds you of the most in the NBA today?
I would have to go with Zach Levine. I mean, the combination of being a scorer and, tying that in with his athleticism, him being able to, do a lot during the transition opportunities and, things of that nature. I think Zach Levine is definitely a guy that, really comes to mind when it comes to, an NBA comparison for Jaylin Green. I mean, those two, they have a lot of similarities. Both of them are the franchise player for the next couple of years for their organization. But, I mean, I don't think there's too many guys that can emulate what Jaylin Green's able to do on the basketball court. I mean, I've seen some comparisons with Bradley Beal. Maybe when it comes to shot creation to a certain degree, he might have a few similarities, but I think Zach Levine is a much better NBA comparison. Yeah,
and I think, it's going to be interesting with Jaylin Green. I didn't see a whole lot of – the only really stuff I saw from Jaylin Green was highlights on YouTube. I really didn't watch any of his games, but I feel like a lot of people are saying that he's got a really big upside, and if he can just be solid in his first year, because, again, similar to Cade Cunningham, he's not going to have a lot of options if John Wall does end up getting traded. But we'll definitely see what happens there in Houston, because, again, they're going to be in for a long rebuild as well. Now we go to Evan Mobley, and Mobley seems like a guy that will either have a really good career or just a really bad career. Where do you think Mobley ranks? And, is there a chance for him to eventually make an all-star team?
When it comes to Evan Mobley, he's one of the prospects that I really wasn't all that high on heading into this year's draft, just simply because I didn't think he had much of a winning impact when it comes to USC, what he did in college. And, that kind of strikes me, especially when, this is a guy that can potentially be a lottery pick. There also is going to be a few questions defensively. I think he can be a great shot blocker at the next level. But when it comes to posterior defense, I think he could really struggle. Guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, they can really light him up on the opposing side of the basketball. And he probably won't really have those opportunities to guard players like that too much in his rookie year. But outside of that, Evan Mobley, he is a decent player, but I don't really know if he really moves the needle all that much when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers' future, to be honest with you.
He kind of came out of nowhere, I feel like, because, again, USC isn't known for their basketball, but they had a really good season last year. They went to the Sweet 16. Of course, they ended up getting knocked out by UCLA, who made the Final Four, but I feel like he came out of nowhere, and I just, especially with the Cavs, it's really debatable with Mobley. Do you think there's a chance? I think the Cavs, again, similar to the Pistons and similar to the Rockets, they're a few years away. But do you think the Cavs can actually make the playoffs next season?
No way, no how. No way, no how. There's no way. Maybe we give them a shot at the play-in tournament. Let's see. The coaching is a question. Also, those players, I just don't feel like they're ready just yet. I mean, you got guys like Darius Garland that are still a work in progress. Jarrett Allen just got traded there. Isaac Okoro, he'll be heading into his sophomore season. And then you still have guys like Kevin Love on the roster. So I mean, I'm not really sure, but I definitely don't think this is a team that's playoff ready just yet, especially with, the issues with Colin Sexton in the locker room. I've said it in the past on other podcasts that I felt like this guy was a cancer in the locker room, and ultimately it ended up being true to a certain degree. But I just can't see Cleveland being in the postseason next year. It's just far too soon to think like that.
Yeah, I think they're at least a year or two away. I know we'll probably talk a little about this when we get to talking about free agency, but Kevin Love, it seems like every year, even every time there's a trade, he seems like he's out of Cleveland, but yet he's still there. Do you think Love will be traded before the season begins?
Probably not. I think there was even something about him talking about he wanted to be there long term. So I think that's definitely out of the window. But let's say there was a scenario where he did request a trade. I think a team like Portland could benefit having him. I mean, the only problem is Portland is an organization that tends to be really cheap. So I doubt that they want to take on that contract. But I think that would be a good fit for him if he were to, be in trade rumors.
It just seems like Kevin Love, every time there's a trade, they're like, oh, he could go here, he could go there. I think even at one time he was projected to go to the Lakers, and it just seems like I think he kind of likes Cleveland, to be honest with you. He kind of likes that situation he's in. I mean, of course, he's more of a mentor than really a star player now because he's getting older, and it seems like he gets injured a lot more. But again, we'll see what happens. Now we go to the 4th overall pick. The Raptors kind of shocked some people by not taking Jalen Suggs. They took Scottie Barnes instead. What do you think about Barnes' future in the NBA?
Man, I love Scottie Barnes. I love his game. I mean, FSU guys, I'm really big on them because they are phenomenal defensively, and I think Toronto recognized that. Now you can make the case that Jalen Suggs is just as good defensively as well, but I think with them making a lot of rumors about being high on Scottie Barnes heading up into the draft, especially after his draft workout, it was no surprise to me too much that, they selected him. I feel like the reason why they selected him specifically over Suggs, though, is because that somehow, some way, they probably see a generational talent. And, they just felt like he was probably the better pick within, the entire organization. So I think Scottie Barnes has a bright future in Toronto.
And it seems like the Raptors are in complete rebuild mode. They got rid of Kyle Lowry. Of course, Kawhi is out. He's been out for a while. DeMar DeRozan's been gone for a while. And it feels like Pascal Siakam is that next guy to go. But what do you think about the Raptors? What do you think they'll do in the next few years? Because I feel like they're, feels like they're kind of back to what they were, in the early 2010s when they were kind of in rebuild mode. What do you think the Raptors need to do to get back to what they were just a few years ago?
Man, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously you're going to have to draft well, probably make a few trades here and there. I mean, they have a lot of valuable pieces on that roster, but I just can't really pinpoint what Toronto exactly is trying to do. I mean, they signed Gary Trent Jr. He tends to be a hidden gem now that he's no longer crippled within that Portland Trailblazers offense. But I mean, there's really no telling because you kind of feel like, okay, they seem like they're going young and they want to, develop some of these younger guys on that roster. But we also hear that, they're trying to make pushes for guys like Ben Simmons in the offseason trades and stuff. So, I mean, there's really just no telling. But I trust a guy like Masai Ujiri, he's made the right decisions throughout his entire tenure being under the Toronto Raptors organization. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Now, you just mentioned Masai Ujiri. He's back in Toronto. He just re-signed with the Raptors. And it seems like every few years there's a chance that he either leaves or stays or something like that. But do you think, and we all know Ujiri has done an excellent job with the Raptors. He helped them win a championship back in 2019. He made the bold move of trading DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi Leonard. Do you think he should be, in a few years, considered, for the NBA Hall of Fame just because of what he's done with the Raptors?
I think you can definitely consider it. Anytime you win hardware in the NBA, you definitely have to be considered for the, NBA Hall of Fame. I mean, look at a guy like Tony Kukoc. He was just elected into the Hall of Fame. I think this past year, actually. And you look at his offensive numbers, they weren't necessarily great. They don't really jump off the page for you. But it's just it's really about the impact that, he's had on that organization. And then, when it comes to Masai Ujiri, he's definitely had a positive one for the most part. So, yeah, I would consider him an NBA Hall of Famer for sure.
Yeah, because just a few years ago when they made that move to trade away DeMar DeRozan for Kawhi, and it was more of a one-year rental, and of course they acquired Danny Green as well. Like the Raptor fans were not happy, all that stuff, and a year later they hold the title. And there were some things with the Warriors, but still they were able to win that championship and beat the Sixers and beat the Bucks on their way to beating the Warriors in the finals. So I definitely think Ujiri should be somewhere in the consideration. And he's done an excellent job. Now, as we round up the top five, the Orlando Magic, I believe, got a steal in Jalen Suggs. I really like Suggs, especially after coming out of Gonzaga. But what did the Orlando Magic exactly get with Jalen Suggs?
I mean, they got a hard worker. They got a guy that's going to come in. He's going to have an impact from day one. He's going to, spread that winning culture. One thing we know about Jalen Suggs, he's won at every single level, high school, almost college, I would say. But, other than that, I really love Jalen Suggs as an athlete. I think he can bring a lot within that organization. Only question is, what does the rotation look like? Who are going to be the guys for, the foreseeable future? Because we know they signed Markelle Fultz to a contract extension, I think, the beginning of last season. And then you draft Cole Anthony, and you just traded for a guy in RJ Hampton. So, I mean, it could be a little bit messy on the perimeter at the guard spot. But other than that, I think Jalen Suggs, he can have a phenomenal impact for the Orlando Magic here in the near future.
I kind of forgot about Cole Anthony, but I know he had a solid season. But with Jalen Suggs being in Orlando, I think he doesn't have as much pressure because even though Toronto, again, wasn't expected to be great, I think he has more pressure there than he does in Orlando. And I think there's a good chance that he could win the Rookie of the Year. And I think his biggest opponents for that would be, of course, Cade Cunningham and Jaylin Green. But I definitely think Jalen Suggs has a very good chance of winning Rookie of the Year. And, finally, because the Orlando Magic are also in rebuilding mode. They traded away, Vucevic. They traded away Gordon. They traded Fournier. And it seems like, they're completely in rebuild. But I think there's a good chance for Jalen Suggs that he'll be very successful in Orlando. And we'll see what they do elsewhere because, of course, they're going to need a big man. But it's going to take them a few years before they can get back into that playoff mode. Now, as we switch gears to free agency, what shocked you the most about the first day of free agency of which player went where? What shocked you the most?
Man, oh my God, I don't know where to start, but probably Lonzo Ball to Chicago. I mean, you stick in a California type of guy in, the Windy City. I didn't see that coming whatsoever. I mean, leading up to this point, we heard so many rumors about New York. Maybe he re-signs with New Orleans. And I actually kind of felt like he would re-sign with New Orleans, just given the fact that, he's got a pretty good relationship with most of the guys on the roster. He's really close to Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, just guys like that, Josh Hart as well. But Chicago, I mean, they're definitely getting a steal. I mean, this is a guy that he's got the ability to, really facilitate at a high level for the most part, average north of 6 assists. He's going to improve your backcourt in the defense. We know that's one of the biggest problems that Chicago's been dealing with, these last couple of years. Kobe White and Zach Levine hasn't really got the job done these last few seasons. But ultimately, I think Lonzo Ball, he'll be a phenomenal fit in Chicago.
Yeah, and I was a little shocked by that. I wasn't necessarily shocked about Kyle Lowry going to Miami because we all knew Lowry was out the door. But the Lonzo situation, I originally thought he might go to the Hornets to pair up with his brother. And there seemed like there would be a trade for Devontae Graham for Lonzo Ball. But I definitely think the Bulls, they should be in that somewhere in that they should make the playoffs this year. And of course, there's no excuses because now they have, Zach Levine, they got Lonzo, they got Vucevic. Now they brought in DeMar DeRozan. So the Bulls seem like they're contenders now, and they should at least be somewhere in the top 5 in the East, especially with how open the Eastern Conference is.
Can I say something real quick about the Hornets?
Yeah.
Because I don't understand how that really works. I mean, we know that Lonzo and LaMelo and Jello, they all played in high school, obviously. But when you're Lonzo Ball and you're put in a situation in New Orleans where you're playing off ball, you're probably going to be in the same situation to a certain degree when you go to the Hornets because LaMelo Ball, he's going to be the guy that's running the show. He's a much better ball handler, probably a better decision maker, and, he's definitely the better passer between the two. I mean, we saw the crazy passes that he was able to pull off. I mean, he's so comfortable in the pick and roll. There's so many scenarios where LaMelo Ball is just better than Lonzo Ball at the point guard position. So I didn't really see that making too much sense. I mean, obviously, like we said, they played in high school together. They're brothers, I mean, for Christ's sake. But I just didn't think that made much sense.
Yeah, I didn't really know how much or how well it would work together. I just saw there was a lot of, information where the Hornets were interested in trading for him. And I'm not sure exactly how interested LaMelo was to pair up with his brother. And it seemed like Lonzo wasn't super interested, but it was just kind of a thing that I thought might happen. But I definitely think, I mean, Lonzo makes more sense in Chicago, to be honest with you. But, I mean, it was just kind of I just kind of thought that maybe it would happen just because of all the rumors. But at the end of the day, we'll never find out because, of course, he signs in Chicago.
Right.
Now let's go on to another kind of not really a shocker to be perhaps. I just kind of mentioned, but Kyle Lowry to Miami. What did you think about that move?
Seems like he fits Heat culture. I mean, this is a guy, he's got the winning mentality, winning culture. I mean, he just won the championship not too long ago with the Toronto Raptors. I think he can be a really good piece right next to, guys like Duncan Robinson, PJ Tucker, Jimmy Butler. I mean, you name it, everybody else that they signed in free agency and, this offseason. But, I mean, I think Kyle Lowry, he definitely is going to improve, the perimeter defense, similar to what Lonzo Ball brings to Chicago, because we know Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, those two really get picked on, specifically in the postseason, when the game slows down and everything, and guys are trying to pick out matchups and stuff. So I think they'll benefit from having a guy that leads the NBA in charges, is a defensive anchor at the point guard position, and brings in facilitating skills while also being around, I believe, a 20-point scorer per game. So Kyle Lowry, definitely an A+ if you're the Miami Heat.
Yeah, and I think I originally thought Kyle Lowry would maybe go to the Clippers just because he had connections with Kawhi Leonard and Serge Ibaka. But I think Miami does make a little more sense for him just because I felt like the Heat had a lot more money than the Clippers did. And, of course, he's got a great relationship with Jimmy Butler. Where do you think, and I know Victor Oladipo is returning to play with the Heat, but where does he fit in this offense? Because it seems like, or this team, because it feels like he's kind of the odd man out in this situation.
Yeah, I think he definitely will be. I mean, there may be some scenarios where, they look for him to score at the end of the shot clock. I know they typically did that a lot with Jimmy Butler, and that kind of hurt his game to a certain degree last season. But maybe there could be some bright spots. But ultimately, I think he just has to get on the court first. I mean, this is a guy that's been in and out of, seasons with injuries and everything. So we really just kind of have to see where he is durable-wise. But ultimately, maybe he can be spark late for them in the postseason or something. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think he was really good in Indiana, and after he's had so many injuries, which is kind of disappointing because he's such a good player, and I feel like we still haven't seen the full Victor Oladipo just because he's been injured so much, and I think he's on his 4th or 5th NBA team, which is kind of sad a little bit, but
right.
It's going to be weird to see when he comes back on the court how well he works with the Heat, because again, they already have Kyle Lowry, they already have Tyler Hero, they already have, Jimmy Butler and Duncan Robinson, so it's just going to be kind of different to see where he actually fits in this lineup. Could you see him possibly getting traded if it just doesn't work out?
Yeah, definitely. The thing is, for what though? I mean, we feel like Victor Oladipo holds a lot of value, but it's definitely been diminished due to, his injury history and everything. Maybe you can find a desperate team like maybe Boston. I'm not sure. Maybe, Boston will want to give up a few of their assets to, bring in Victor Oladipo. We know Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown definitely need help. Not sure exactly how well that would fit, so to speak. I'm just throwing ideas out there. Maybe New York possibly wants him as well in a trade. I'm not really sure, but I just don't. I mean, I would love to see him out of Miami, to be honest with you, because I don't want to see the headache of Miami trying to fit him in within their offense, and then defensively he's not really that competent when it comes to everybody else on that roster. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I think, New York does make a lot of sense, too, just because what they did this offseason was just weird to bring in Kemba Walker. Of course, we were talking about that before we started recording, but it was just kind of weird what New York did. And, yeah, probably if they were desperate enough, they would try to see if they could make a trade for Victor Oladipo. Now, what's another guy that re-signed was Chris Paul. He re-signed with the Clippers, or not re-signed with the Clippers. He re-signed with the Suns. Were you shocked by that? Because I wasn't necessarily super shocked that he returned to Phoenix.
No, I don't think anybody was shocked by that decision. I mean, he said in his press conference after they lost the NBA Finals, they're going to run it back. So, I mean, obviously, we already knew that there wasn't going to be too many teams that were willing to pay, a 35, 36-year-old Chris Paul, $40 million a year or however much he's making. But I think he can be a good fit in Phoenix once again. Their postseason hopes probably, gets diminished a little bit and decreased, with Golden State being a little bit fully healthy and, the Lakers increasing their roster and their talent on that roster as well. So, I mean, maybe Chris Paul can make it work. Maybe we see another conference finals. Not really sure, but we'll just have to wait and see for that one as well.
Yeah, speaking of the Warriors, they made some news yesterday, or at least on Friday, that they re-signed Andre Iguodala, or they brought him back. He's probably going to be more of a mentor, but where do you see the Warriors if they finally? Where do you see the Warriors do, or what do you see the Warriors doing next year if Klay Thompson is healthy?
I can see this team in the conference finals. Just because I feel like teams like Denver, I feel like they can compete with Denver. Maybe they outshoot them in the series. And, when it comes to the Utah Jazz, I think they're kind of pretenders to a certain degree. I mean, I love Donovan Mitchell. Not the biggest fan of Rudy Gobert, to be honest with you. Joe Ingles, he's a phenomenal player. Royce O'Neal brings a lot of value. And they just re-signed Mike Conley to another 3-year contract, I believe. But I think in comparison to, the rest of the Western Conference, I think the Warriors probably sit atop of that, alongside teams like the Los Angeles Lakers compared to everybody else if they're 100% healthy.
Yeah, I feel like, what they did last year, or at least what Steph Curry did last year, was unbelievable. But, they still didn't make the playoffs. And, if Klay Thompson is 100%, a lot of people were picking them to make the finals or at least be a contender last year before the news that Thompson was going to be out for the second straight year. So it's going to be the West is going to be even better next year if you get a healthy Klay Thompson. I kind of want to mention this now. Kawhi Leonard re-signed with the Clippers as well. He's probably not going to play at all next year. If they're lucky, he plays a little bit. But where do you? The Clippers also re-signed Reggie Jackson, Nicholas Batum, which I think were smart signings. What do you think the Clippers do next season, even without Kawhi Leonard?
I didn't know that they re-signed Reggie Jackson. That's new news to me. Okay, that's good. That's a good signing for them. I mean, obviously, he brought a lot of value this postseason. Definitely erupted in that second round series against the Utah Jazz. It was a big help for them to, move on to their first appearance in the Western Conference Finals. But I think we see more of the same from the Los Angeles Clippers. They didn't really make any signings that really moved the needle too much. Typically because, they're kind of backed up when it comes, they don't really have too many draft picks that they can, offer to teams. Nobody really wants a second round pick for, a valuable all-star. And then I think money-wise, they're definitely over the cap. They don't have the luxury like a team like the Golden State Warriors do when it comes to, being over the cap because Golden State, I don't know if you know this or not, JJ, but Golden State, they actually own their own stadium. So all the money that, generates from that stadium when it comes to vendors, season ticket sales, things of that nature, all that money goes to the front office. So that's why they're able to, pay 5 times as much in the cap as compared to, other teams. So they're able to get guys like Otto Porter Jr. and, other free agents this offseason. But I don't think there's too much of a progression when it comes to the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard, if he doesn't play in the beginning of the season, which he definitely isn't because, he just tore his ACL, we're probably not going to see him for the rest of the season. I don't think it makes any sense for him to come back in the middle of the season knowing that he's not going to be 100%. And we already know this is a guy that really likes to take care of his body. So I think the Clippers probably digress to a certain degree next year.
Yeah, and I think, I just can't see Kawhi playing much. And we're kind of all hearing that there's a very good chance that Leonard misses the whole season. And of course, as you mentioned, he really likes to take care of his body. So we'll see what the Clippers do. But I do think signing Reggie Jackson, who was great in the postseason last year, him and Paul George was pretty impressive as well. But yeah, Reggie Jackson was great. Nicholas Batum was a great role player. Not a lot of people really think much. Not really many people think too much about Nicholas Batum, but he was a great role player for him, and he fit that offense or just fit that team really well. So I thought the signings were great. And now, of course, because we're getting close to end the interview, and again, thanks for coming on. But the Knicks, they made some interesting and questionable moves. They signed Kemba Walker. I just don't know how well that's going to work with Derrick Rose. But do you think the Knicks just were desperate to bring in some type of free agent?
Yeah, certainly. I don't know if I have this feeling that they're just trying to hold on to, some of that cap space for next free agency. Maybe that might be the case. But I thought the Kemba Walker signing, it definitely fills some holes to a certain degree offensively. I mean, we know this is a team that struggled to put the ball in the basket last postseason. And, signing Evan Fournier, Kemba Walker, that definitely will help, them from that standpoint. But we also have to kind of look at the contracts. Evan Fournier contract probably overpaid him to a certain degree. And then when it comes to Kemba Walker's injury history, tying him next to a coach like Tom Thibodeau that tends to, kind of run his starters into the ground, not necessarily the perfect match, but maybe he's able to, make this a positive.
Yeah, and I think I forgot about the Tom Thibodeau and Kemba Walker situation. Yeah, as Kemba Walker has not been healthy the last few years, but he's really good when he's healthy. But it seems like the last few years when he went to Boston, he wasn't healthy at all. Of course, he gets straight to OKC and then we all knew he was going to get traded again. But I really feel like the Knicks just were super desperate this offseason to acquire any type of, player. And, Kemba Walker is an all-star, a former all-star, but it just kind of seems like just the Knicks were super desperate. Another team that didn't really make much moves, and I thought they needed to do something to help out Luka, would have been the Mavs. What do you think the Mavs need to do in order to actually, I know they need to help out Luka, but what do they actually need in terms of helping their superstar?
They need an all-star or all-NBA caliber player right next to Luka Doncic. But because a lot of people talk about Luka Doncic, he's so ball dominant, he doesn't really trust his teammates all that much, which probably is true to a certain degree. But, I mean, when you look at that roster, when you have guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. that you're paying, I think $72 million for the next 4 years, it's something along those lines. And then you have Jalen Brunson in your backcourt as a point guard. I think you're going to be able to make the postseason with those guys, but you're not going to make a huge leap. I mean, Phoenix, we saw them go from outside of the postseason in the past 11 years to, an NBA Finals appearance. Why was that? It wasn't because they just went out and got, any random Joe walking across the street. They signed an all NBA caliber player in Chris Paul. And I think Luka Doncic definitely needs that type of player. I would have liked to see them sign maybe DeMar DeRozan, maybe even Spencer Dinwiddie. You never know. But, I mean, they just need a lot of more perimeter threats on, the Dallas Mavericks in order for them to, really compete in the Western Conference that we know is constantly improving day by day. Yeah,
I kind of feel like the Mavericks are kind of in that same position they were. Now, they did get rid of a few players, but it just seems like they're kind of just kind of the same place they were. And I'm not sure how good Jason Kidd as a coach will be. But it just feels like the Mavs just kind of stayed put, and especially with the Western Conference getting better. And now, at the end of the day, who do you think so far has won free agency, and who do you think has been the biggest loser of free agency?
Winners definitely have to be. Can I pick more than one team, because I really can't nibble it down to just one. I would have to start off with the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, them trading for Russell Westbrook and, essentially giving up a bag of chips. I like KCP, but, he was hit or miss in the postseason. One moment he scores 1 point, doesn't do anything defensively for you, and then the next night he can basically win the series for you against, a team like the Houston Rockets that he did in the second round last year. But I would also say Chicago are definitely winners. I mean, signing DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, really improving your offense, improving your defense to a certain degree as well. Also getting a guy like Alex Caruso. I thought he was a big signing. You didn't really have to pay too much to get, a valuable role player in him. He's also got championship acumen. He's a winner. So I thought that was a good signing. And obviously, the Miami Heat, they were also really big winners, acquiring guys like Kyle Lowry. PJ Tucker was a humongous signing. I don't know exactly why, Milwaukee wasn't able to match the money that, PJ Tucker was requesting, because I think he was requesting 2 years, $20 million, but Miami signed him for 2 years, $15 million. So there's questions there, but I think Miami's definitely big winners. But as far as losers, can't really think of anybody off the top of my head. I don't really consider anybody to be losers so far. There are some individual players that I think are kind of being left out. Number one, Dennis Schroeder. I mean, not too many teams are really high on him, especially for that asking price, $20 million a year for a guy that, scored 0 points in the postseason last year. Not going to be exactly urging to, sign him in free agency. But I think Dennis Schroeder is probably the only loser in free agency, if I'm being quite honest.
Yeah, and it feels like, as you said, the Bulls, big winners. I kind of feel like the Knicks were kind of losers because they didn't really do a whole lot, and they still have a lot of money left in free agency. And maybe they hope that next year they can see if they can bring in Kawhi Leonard, but it just feels like Kawhi Leonard is going to get a massive contract with the Clippers next year. So we'll see what ends up happening. And again, thanks for coming on nicely. Do you have anything in store for the future for your podcast or something like that?
Yeah, I'm trying my hardest to get Jackie Young on our podcast and everything. We know she just won in the Olympics a few weeks ago, and I think it was a 3-on-3 tournament. I didn't even know that was a thing. But yeah, we're trying to basically just get more and more interviews in. College basketball season will be coming up shortly. Still trying to get a few more prospects. We're going to touch bases on the name, image, and likeness when it comes to college basketball, because I know there's a lot of guys signing decent contracts for what they've been able to do for their team and everything. But yeah, that's basically what we have in store. I would just love for you guys to all support me and my co-host Greg King for our podcast and everything, because I actually did drop out just to pursue this, because I was I was a former sports analyst at the University of Evansville, but I just didn't feel like it was the right path for me. So I would love for you guys to support me for sure.
All right. Again, thanks for coming nicely. You can check out the Ball Fake podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Are you guys on YouTube by chance?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's our primary source.
Okay, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all that good stuff. You can also check them out on Instagram and Twitter at Ball Fake Podcast. All right, thanks again for coming on nicely, and have a wonderful day and enjoy the season when it comes up in October. So
appreciate you, JJ.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.